Hello and welcome back to another Rush Duel video. Today we're going to be doing a deck profile for the Blue Eyes White Dragon deck, which is a pretty strong deck. Now when the structure deck released, people looked at some of these cards and thought, these look pretty good, but how will it actually translate? Because the deck is very good at summoning a lot of monsters, but does seem to lack some tools to get to your opponent's life points. The deck doesn't have any form of piercing and doesn't have any form of multi-attack, which does mean we are a little bit reliant on our removal spell, Burst Stream of Destruction, to really clear the way and get some damage in. Now this obviously has a bit of a drawback because if we activate Burst Stream of Destruction, we cannot attack with Blue Eyes White Dragon. Now we do have a lot of monsters that change their name to be Blue Eyes White Dragon, which also means if we activate their effects to make them become Blue Eyes, they can't attack. So the primary thing we want to be doing is using our Burst Stream of Destruction, then using our ultimate Blue-Eyed Legend to fuse our other monsters into a Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon and get to our opponent's life points that way, which can be pretty good. So let's go through the card by card so we can kind of get a feel for what this deck wants to do. So we have Blue Eyes White Dragon, the very first Legend card ever introduced into Rush Duels. 3000 attack is still a fantastic stat. And 2500 defense is really good also. This card is especially good because it is a normal Legend monster, which means we can bring it back with Legend Strike and we can add it back to our hand with Legend Magician, which does come up quite a lot. Next up we have Blue Eyes Bright Dragon. This is a 2500 attack monster. This card's name becomes Blue Eyes White Dragon while in the hand. That is basically only really relevant when we're trying to fuse, and obviously that will only be relevant if we're using Polymerization or our fusion spell, the Ultimate Blue-Eyed Legend, because both of these cards can fuse from hand, but this does come up occasionally. We can send the top card of our deck to the graveyard. This turn, this card's name becomes Blue Eyes White Dragon, and it gains 500 attack. So a 3000 attack monster becomes Blue Eyes. Okay, pretty decent. Then, if you have a face-up Legend normal monster on your field, you can destroy one face-up level 8 or lower monster on your opponent's field. So this is the other way that we tend to get to our opponent's life points if we're not using Burst Stream of Destruction. If we do have our Blue Eyes White Dragon out, which again, if we can get it into the graveyard just by trying to mill it in there, we can get it back with a variety of different ways, but then we can use our Blue Eyes White Dragon to pop a monster that's in the way, and then attack over the potential other two monsters they've got, and then use our third monster to get in for some damage. Next up, we have Blue Eyes Vision Dragon. So you have a face-up level 8 or higher Dragon-type monster on your field. You can special summon this card from your hand to your field in face-up defense position. Now that's very important. Has to come out in defense position if summoned by its own effect. Send the top card of your deck to the graveyard. This turn, this card's name becomes Blue Eyes White Dragon. If you fusion summon Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, this face-up card can be treated as two materials. So again, if we want this card to be treated as Blue Eyes, it has to be on the field, and we have to use its effect to turn it into Blue Eyes. We can't use it from hand like we can with the Bright Dragon. But being able to use this as two materials can be really good. This is the easiest way that we have to get to our Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon. On top of the fact that it mills, and so does Bright Dragon, which means quite often we'll be summoning these out, even if we have no reason to actually make them a Blue Eyes White Dragon, we'll use their effects just to try and fill up our graveyard. Because, again, any level 4s in the graveyard is really good for using Legend Strike. We want to get to our Blue Eyes White Dragon ASAP and get that into the graveyard, because again, we can bring that back with Legend Magician or Legend Strike, or Phoenix Dragon for that matter, because Phoenix Dragon is also a fantastic way to use the graveyard. Dragons have always been really good at utilizing the graveyard as kind of a toolbox because of Phoenix Dragon, so we do just want to be milling as much as we possibly can, and both of these boss monsters are pretty good for that. Next up, we have All-Seeing Harvey. So All-Seeing Harvey is generically just kind of a good card. It's not necessarily a staple, but it is very staple adjacent in that you can play it in anything, but it's not a requirement. You don't have to play All-Seeing Harvey in every deck, but it is very good. 1300 attack stat line is fine, and we can look at one face down card in our opponent's field, which can be good on spell trap cards, because if we have a way to pop spell traps, for example Legend Strike, we can look at one of them and decide if that is enough of a priority to pop, or if we should randomly pop one of the other back row. But if we do look at a monster card and it has 1500 or more defense, we can destroy it, which is really good at dealing with those annoyingly high defense monsters like Galactica Oblivion, like Dark Lurker, like Pure Glass Spears. There are so many high defense monsters that are kind of annoying, and Harvey is just a good way to get rid of them. And again, it's another way for us to get to our opponent's life points, because again, we do lack piercing and we do lack multi-attack. Next up, Absolute Lord of D. So during the main phase, this card was normal or special summoned. Excavate the top 4 cards of your deck. You could add one excavated level 8 light attribute dragon type monster and or one excavated the ultimate Blue-Eyed Legend to your hand, shuffle the remaining cards into your deck. So the reason this card is so good is because we can add both. We can add the Ultimate Blue-Eyed Legend, and we can add any of our high-level dragon monsters, which means this card can effectively +2 us, which is insane. Any card that gives you a +2 is always going to be very, very strong, and Absolute Lord of D is one of the best ways to just find the pieces you need. Now, there will be some times when you just whiff with this card, and that's just something you just have to deal with. It's not the end of the world though, because you can then just tribute it off for a Blue Eyes Bright or a Blue Eyes White Dragon, or you could use Soul Drake and then send both Lord of D and Soul Drake to the graveyard to bring back one of your cards from the graveyard. Speaking of Soul Drake, during the main phase, this card was normal or special summoned. Send 2 face-up level 4 or lower effect monsters from your field to the graveyard. Special summon 1 level 8 light attribute dragon type monster from your graveyard face-up to your field. This turn, your level 7 and lower monsters cannot attack. So the restriction of your level 7 and lower monsters cannot attack can actually get a little bit annoying, but it is worth it to be able to get access to our boss monsters. Blue Eyes Vision Dragon is a decent card, just 2500 attacks good enough on its own, but also if we do have the means to get out a Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, this is going to be the easiest way to do so. Blue Eyes Bright Dragon can sometimes pop a monster, which is decent, and once again it can mill and go up to 3000 attack, which is always going to be really, really good. So Soul Drake is just a really good tool, and we use this effect a ton while playing this deck. Next up, Legend Magician. I mean, this is basically a staple at this point. Every deck seems to be running Legend Magician and the Legend Strike, but this deck specifically is really, really good because we are so reliant on our Blue Eyes White Dragon that having ways to get it back from the graveyard to our hand, both with Legend Strike and Legend Magician, is just so powerful you can't not use it. Not to mention that milling cards is always going to be really good, so Legend Magician, fantastic. Next up, we have Barrier Statue. This is now basically a staple as well. Neither player can special summon non-fire attribute monsters. This is a really good floodgate against any deck that wants to special summon, which is almost all of them. And the only decks that can really ignore this are fire decks, which is going to be basically just pyro decks. So Barrier Statue is just really, really strong, and we can bring it back using Legend Strike, which is just a little bit of an added bonus. Next up, Amazing Dealer. Again, this is a deck that really wants to try and fill up the graveyard to be able to toolbox it and find the Blue Eyes White Dragon ASAP. So being able to discard 3 and draw 3 can be really, really good. One thing I will say about Dealer is you don't really want to use this unless you are able to tribute it off, because ending the turn with a 0 attack monster really sucks. Next up, Phoenix Dragon. Again, toolboxing the graveyard, very, very important. Being able to get back any of our level 5 or higher is basically just going to be these 7, but these 7 boss monsters are really, really strong. So being able to get access to any of them is really, really good, especially Blue Eyes Vision Dragon, which means we can discard any card, get back Vision Dragon, and then special summon it if we have any of our other dragons out already, which is just being able to special summon a 2500 attack, 2000 defense monster. A lot of the time is good enough. Even if you don't do anything with it, just milling a card and then ending the turn with it in defense mode can be enough to protect your life points, which is still really good. So next up, Legend Strike. This is basically our spell trap hate of choice. And again, there's no reason to not use this, right? We are playing the Legend Magicians. We do have a ton of really good level 4 monsters, and we are playing a normal Legend monster. It's a no-brainer. This card is just fantastic. Next up, Graceful Charity. Again, we want to be digging through our deck quite a lot. We have to find all of our combo pieces in order to actually use our combo and try and win the game. And our combo is basically always going to be get out some amalgamation of cards that are Blue Eyes White Dragon, wipe our opponent's board with Burst Stream of Destruction, and then fuse into our Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon. A lot of decks just straight up do not have an out to Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, so it is very, very good a lot of the time. Your opponent will have to use Legends or something to get rid of it. Obviously, that's not always going to be the case, but quite often that does end up happening. Next up, Ultimate Blue-Eyed Legend. So we can fusion summon a level 10 or higher dragon-type monster by sending up to 3 dragon-type monsters from your hand and or field to the graveyard as material. This turn, the monster special summoned by this effect cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. So the only monster we can actually summon with this is Blue-Eyed Legend. Now, we can't summon 5-headed dragon because this requires 5 monsters, and the restriction on this is by sending 3 dragon monsters from your hand and or field to graveyard. So we can only really summon Blue Eyes Legend, but Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon is a fantastic boss monster anyway. 4500 attack vanilla monster might not seem like much, but 4500 is a ton. A lot of decks will really struggle to get over that, and the added effect saying this turn the monster special summoned by the effect cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects is really good. That basically means that our Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon will be immune to things like Torrential Tribute. It will be immune to things like Mirror Force for the turn, which is really, really good. Now, this does mean that we oftentimes will just walk into a Magic Cylinder, but that's something we just have to accept that that's going to happen occasionally. A lot of decks really struggle to deal with Magic Cylinder, and this is one of them. Next up, Burst Stream of Destruction. So if we have face-up Blue Eyes White Dragon on our field, destroy all monsters on the opponent's field. This turn, you cannot attack with Blue Eyes White Dragon. So again, this will count all of your Blue Eyes White Dragons or any of your monsters that are counting themselves as Blue Eyes White Dragon, which means if we use Bright or we use Vision, they won't be able to attack that turn. But being able to wipe your opponent's board is insane. Being able to run 3 copies of Raigeki in Rush Duel is bonkers. This card is definitely the MVP of the deck, and this is how we won most of our games in the tournament that we played this deck in. Next up, Magical Stone Excavation. Again, a fantastic card. All of the spell cards in here are such high value that being able to get back any of them is always going to be very, very strong. Obviously, getting back our Legend spell is always going to be good. Legend Strike can be really, really good to pop your opponent's back row. Being able to get the Ultimate Blue-Eyed Legend can let us basically summon out our boss monster and try and end the game. And Burst Stream Destruction is always going to be fantastic. Having effectively a 4th copy of Raigeki is crazy. Next up, Trade-In. This is going to be our consistency card of choice because all of our boss monsters are level 8. Not really much more to say than that. Discarding a card, drawing 2 is always going to be very relevant, especially if we can get our Blue Eyes into the graveyard ready to use our Legend Strike with. Next up, we have Nobody's Scat Thief. Again, this is basically a combo deck. And in any kind of combo deck, especially decks where you want to fuel the graveyard, Nobody's Scat Thief is always going to be fantastic. Generically, it's just a fantastic trap card as well. Being able to set up your hand for next turn, being able to set up the graveyard, and being able to potentially save your life depending on what deck you're against. Scat Thief is amazing. And then finally, Mirror Force. Again, you could probably swap this around with Magic Cylinder kind of interchangeably. It kind of depends what deck you're against as to which one's better. But having a Mirror Force is always going to be good, right? It's very rare that your opponent is going to be able to make themselves completely immune to Mirror Force with something like, let's say, Ultimate Blue-Eyed Legend. But Mirror Force, a lot of the time, can just end the game on the spot. If your opponent just runs into it with 3 monsters, they basically wipe their own field, then you get to summon out your Crackback and just blow them out of the game. So really, really good card. So, looking at the side deck, we have Mad Rare Aquila. This card is still really, really good against level 6 centric decks. The main one is going to be Excutie. Excutie is still a very strong deck, and people do still play it, so this card does come up, and Aquila is just the best tool for dealing with that. I'd rather just have 3 copies of this in the side, and basically have a much, much stronger matchup against that deck, rather than trying to struggle through it. We have our Talismanic Seal Arrays. These are basically in here just to deal with maximums for the most part, but also in the mirror, this is pretty good. So if your opponent summons a 4500 guy, you kind of want to have a way to deal with it. We have Dark Hole in case we feel we need it. Oftentimes we don't, but I'd rather have this in the side than not. We have Prison Island, Cell Block 5 and 6. Again, not bad into the Excutie matchup, but primarily is really, really good into the Harpy Lady deck. And again, just having a way to make that matchup a lot more one-sided is something I will always opt in for. Double Dragon's Inferno. Again, Spell Trap Hate is always going to be really good. We don't want to run into our opponent's legends. Then we have 2 Dragonline Pit Trap. Now, this card's a bit weird. We wanted a trap that we could use to respond to our opponent's summons, but Dragonline Pit Trap can be a bit awkward because our monsters are level 8. If we end up getting 2 of our monsters out and our opponent summons pretty much anything, it becomes very difficult to pop their cards with our Dragonline Pit Trap because we will end up still having a level 8 monster on the field. So this card was a little bit shaky, but it did come up a few times during the tournament I played this deck in, and I'm glad I had it, but maybe there was a better card I could use instead of this. Next up, we have Torrential Tribute. Again, some matchups very much want you to have Torrential Tribute. Things like playing against Gaia, playing against Sea Serpent Maximum. There are a lot of decks that basically punish you for having traps that you need to use during the battle phase. Any decks that are really proficient at popping your back row, or any cards that say your opponent cannot activate trap cards during the battle phase, really, really punish. So that's why Torrential Tribute is always going to be a must in every side deck. And then Magic Cylinder, again, there are just some matchups where you need this. I would say things like 7-1 Diffusion. This would be really good into. Also the Mirror, if your opponent does activate their Ultimate Blue-Eyed Legend and gets out their Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, the best way to deal with it is to Magic Cylinder them in the face for 4,500. So this is a very, very powerful deck. We took this into a tournament and actually went undefeated in Swiss. We went 5-0. We unfortunately did get knocked out in the top cut due to a bit of bad luck, but this deck is very, very solid. It's very, very powerful. While we were playing it in Swiss, it felt nigh unstoppable. It felt like we always had an out and we always had an answer to everything. It's not necessarily going to be like the best deck ever, but it is very, very strong. Very, very powerful. Again, being able to swing around 3,000 and 2,500 attack monsters is always going to be very, very good. Being able to have 3 copies of Raigeki is always going to be really, really good. And being able to get out a 4,500 monster that can't be destroyed by effects is really, really good. But let's fire in some replays so I can show you what I've been talking about.